Hi players, bonjour from Paris, my name is Asaf and welcome to my channel Easy Board Games. Today I'm going to show you how to play Tsukuyumi Full Moon Down that was designed by Felix Merdiket and was published by King Racoon and Grey Fox Games. Before we're getting started, I just want to say thank you for the amazing community of Tsukuyumi in BGG, especially to Carsten Ullrich, and I really hope that I'm pronouncing this name correctly, and also King Racoon that took their time to verify the video before releasing it. Ready to see how we play? Let's go to setup. Alright guys, so basically I've skipped most of the setup, but let's go over whatever that we can see right now on the screen to understand a little bit what's going on. So I have chosen the third scenario that you can see on page 21 in the rulebook that is called Pacific Standoff. So what we can see right now are the moon tiles right over here, and then the rest of the tiles have been chosen randomly in order to create whatever we can see over here on page 21. Next to the board we can see that we have some tokens. They are called property tokens, and over here we have some blockade tokens. Next we have the event cards, so after we have shuffled them, of course, we're going to open 2 cards and the rest we're going to keep face down. Next, we're going to have the victory point board, where we're just going to put later markers from the different factions in order to signify how many victory points that specific faction has. Then we're going to have the mission cards, 1 per faction. That is something that each faction can fulfill. And next to it, we're going to have the initiative board. That, of course, we're going to have the initiative tokens on it. So obviously this is going to be a 3-player game. The first faction, the red right over here, is going to be the Cyber Samurai. Next, the blue faction is the Nomads. And then the green faction, which is called Warlords. The last thing that we can see right over here on the board is related to the Oni. We're going to have here 3 cards of the Oni. The first one is the Oni Conquest card. Then we're going to have 2 legendary Oni cards. That the first one is the Observer and the second one is the Abyssal. Now from those 21 miniatures of the Oni that we have, we're going to draw 7 that are going to be randomly placed on the different moon tiles. Now here, a little bit away from the board, I have placed the 3 factions and all their components. So this is all the components that we have for the Warlords, and because of my accent and my English, from now on they are the green faction. So what we can see right over here are the different tokens that they're going to have. Here they're going to have their action cards. Over here they have their faction sheet and the different miniatures that are still in their supply. That means that they're not going to be part of their starting units. Also, we're going to have this card right over here, because in the miniature version of the game, of course, we cannot have all the details like we have on the standee version. So this is just a card that is going to help us remember what are all of those stats of the different units. Now, obviously, the green faction doesn't need this, right? They actually need the other cards that show the different stats of the other factions. So each player basically needs to have all the cards of the other factions. But here, in order to save some space and to have a little bit less headache for me, we're going to put it as we can see right now. So we have the green faction, then we're going to have the Nomads, the blue faction. Last but not least, we're going to have the Cyber Samurai, the red faction, and you can already see that this faction has a little bit of extra material over here. Those are these uplink cards that you can see. You can understand also that this faction is going to be a little bit more complex to play than the blue and the green factions. Now, on the other side of each faction sheet, we're going to have some information about this, and also what do we need to have at the beginning of the game. This is why right now you can see on the board that we have some different tokens, for example, that are already part of the setup for the green faction. But guys, we have here 8 factions, and I don't want to go in detail to each and one of them. So you're going to have to trust me here a little bit. And this is what the green player decided to do in order to start the game. Now, to decide which player is going to be first in the initiative track, we're going to have numbers over here, and we're going to arrange them from the lowest to the highest. So the red faction is going to start, then we're going to have the blue, and then we have the green. And in that same order, we're actually going to put these control markers that you can see right over here. So the red faction decided to put it just like this. The green actually are going to be last, but I do want to show you just a small setup for the blue faction. So they of course need to choose 3 areas that they're going to put their control markers. Now, the control markers have to be either adjacent to their home base, for the blue, red, or green, but again, we're concentrating on the blue, or they can actually create some sort of a link. So we can do something like this, but also we can do something like this, right? Because this is right now linked. So of course, the blue faction needs to put it before the green one, but in order to save some time, this is how the blue faction decided to start the game. Now, of course, we're going to place those units that we have seen before on the other side of the faction sheet, and you can place it either on the home area or on one of the starting areas of that specific faction. So in our case, the blue is just going to place it like this. Again, it doesn't really matter. We're not here to give any kind of strategical advice. It's just going to be like this. And also, something else that we have here with the blue is that they will need to put some mine tokens that we can see right over here. And again, doesn't matter how exactly they're going to spread them. Then what we'll need to do is to shuffle all the action cards that we have, and we're going to deal 6 randomly, of course, to each faction. So what you can see over here belongs to the green player, over here to the blue, and over here to the red player. In Tsukuyumi, as you already understood, each player is going to take the role of a highly asymmetrical faction, and they're going to try and have the highest amount of victory points after 4 rounds. That is going to be the standard game, not talking about if you want to have a longer game with 5 rounds. And they will be able to do that by achieving different things, like controlling the different areas, having control the centerpiece of the moon, achieving different missions, and also achieving their specific faction goals that are marked on their faction sheets. Every round will consist of 3 steps. The first one is to choose one of these action cards that they have received at the beginning of the game. The next step is to execute this action card phase by phase. The first phase is the white phase, which is identical to all the players because that is the back of all the cards, where players will have to choose 2 different actions from the 4 listed at the back of each of the action cards. Then, after all players in initiative order have executed this phase, we're going to move on to the blue phase. So now it depends on which card did you choose to play, and you're going to execute whatever is written over there. Then after all the players have executed the blue phase, we're going to have the same thing with the green phase, and then we're going to have the same thing with the red phase. After all the players have executed the cards, they're going to be discarded, and then we're going to have some sort of a small scoring phase, and we're going to do the same thing in the next round. After the 4th round, again in the standard game, we're going to have an end of game scoring phase, and the winner will be the faction that has the most victory points. So just a few things before we're zooming into the phases. First of all, executing actions are optional. You don't have to do it, with the only exception of the Oni actions. But again, this is something that we're going to see a little bit later. In each phase, the player is going to choose how they would like to resolve the actions that they will be able to do, with the only exception that in the red phase, the movement will have to come before the attack itself. So you cannot attack and then move. You'll have to execute first the movement and then the attack. So let's start with the first step, and that is selecting the action card. So the green player is going to look at all of his 6 action cards. He's going to choose one of them that he would like to play in this round. And the other 5 he's going to pass to the player on his left. So the green player is going to pass these cards to the blue player. The blue player is going to choose also one of the cards that he has in his hand, and he's going to pass the rest of the cards to the red player. The red player is going to do the same thing. So he's going to choose one of these cards and he's going to pass these 5 cards to the green player. Now, according to the initiative order, so again, it's going to be the red player that is going to play first. He's going to choose 2 actions from what he can see at the back of the action card, and he's going to execute them, of course, if he wishes to. So I think that now will be a good time to talk about the different actions that he will be able to do, and we're going to explain a little bit about them. The first action that we can see here is to draw an event card and play up to 1 event card. Of course, when you see this symbol in a different place, it can be draw 2 event cards or 3, execute 2 of them, or in any constellation that the card will indicate. So let's say that the red player has chosen this. He will be able to take either one of these cards that he can see, or if he doesn't like any of them, he can gamble and take the first card that he can see right over here. Now pay attention that it says play up to 1 event card, and that means that he can actually take this event card and just place it next to his playing area and use it in a different time. The next action that we can see is the produce units or upgrade to the value of 1. So again, here it's stated the value of 1, but we can have also the value of 2, 3, and so on. So now I want to take you again to the faction sheet itself, and we can see that different units are going to have here different cost. Usually, weaker units are going to cost less. So what we can see over here on the left side is units that are going to cost 1 of this production, and units that we can see on the right are going to cost 2 production. Sometimes you'll be able to upgrade units. That means you're going to take a unit and you're going to replace it with a stronger unit. Sometimes you'll be able to produce some cards, weapons, and something like that. Again, I don't want to go into the very details of the factions because there are 8 of them and it's going to be complicated, but you'll be able to see it in the different faction sheets. So just for the small example, let's say that the red player has decided to produce 1 attack drone because this is the value of 1. He's going to take this unit and he will be able to put it in his home area or in one of the adjacent tiles. Pay attention that in this case, all of these blockade signs that we can see right over here or in another place are not going to block this option. So unlike movement that we're going to talk about soon enough, even if we would have had this case right over here, so you know what, let's keep it like that. Even though the red player, the adjacent area has a blockade over here, he will still be able to produce this unit and place it right over here. The next action that we can see is to move each of your units up to 1 area. So that will be a great time to talk about movement in general. First of all, we can see that we can move each unit 1 area. That means that we can take even all of our units right over here and move them here if we would have wanted to. We would be able even to take 3 units put over here, 3 over there, and I think you understood what is going on. Sometimes we're going to have these red signs right over here. So units, unless they're flying, will not be able to go through this blockade. This specific unit is a flyer, so doing something like this is not a problem. On the other hand, this unit is not a flyer, and that means that this unit will not be able to move over here. Now, pay attention that the green faction, for example, is able, as one of the asymmetrical powers that it has, will be able to put some of these blockade tokens that will allow it to manipulate a little bit the board. Let's talk about movement through different areas that contain the enemy unit. And of course, we're going to assume that each unit that you can see that is not in your color is an enemy unit. So let's take, for this example, this unit and put it right over here. And we would like to have this unit move 2 steps. Okay, let's say that this is what the card has shown us. If a unit is only moving to this hexagon, there is no problem. If a unit started like this and would like to move from this hexagon, no problem. But if a unit would like to move 2 times into this hexagon and out of this one, then we need to consider a few things. To pass through enemy units, your units must be equal or higher in their strength. So how do we determine the strength of the group? We're going to have three shapes in the miniature version of this game. A miniature with a triangle base will be worth 1 strength. Other miniatures with a round base will be equal 2 strength, and miniature with a rectangular base will be worth 4 strength. So we will need to count the amount of strength that we have with all of the units in that specific area, in that specific hexagon, and compare it to our enemy. Now, obviously, as we can see right over here, this unit has strength of 2, this unit has the strength of 1, so it will not be able to perform 2 steps just like this. It will have to stop right over here. On the other hand, if we would have had this situation, then there is no problem, right? Because we have here the strength of 2, and because this is equal, then they will be able to move on. Now, if we're going to have a unit of a different faction, then they will be compared separately. That means that now if the red faction would like to perform this movement, it will not be possible, because while they have the strength of 2, which is equal to the unit over here of strength of 2, their strength is still lower than this Oni unit that we can see over here that has the strength of 4. The next action that we can see is to execute up to 1 combat action, and that means basically that this faction will be able to trigger 1 combat in 1 area. When we have combat, we're going to resolve a certain sequence. The first thing that we need to do is to spend the combat action, which is what the red player has decided to do right over here. Then the red player, since he's the attacker, is going to select 1 combat card. So the combat cards, as you already understood, is the cards that we can see right over here. In case of the red faction has 3, but blue and green are going to start with 4. So we're going to have here 3 combat cards, and we will need to choose one of them. We're going to have 2 different types of attacks, let's say. One of them is to do conquest, and that means that we would try to take control over a certain area. Or we will decide to do annihilation, and that means to cause damage. Now, when we're choosing to do conquest, we need to compare between the conquest points of the attacking units to the conquest points of the defender units. So here it's going to really help us to see what do we have on these cards that we have seen in the beginning. So let me show it to you on the screen. It will be a little bit easier to see. We can see that we have here 3 units, right? We have an attack drone, and his conquest units is what we can see on the left, so that means 5. Also, we have here a Cyber Samurai 2.1, that is 10 conquest points. And also we have here a Cyber Samurai 2.2 that also equals to 10 conquest points. So together we have here 25. Now we will need to compare it to the same parameter of that specific unit of the green faction. In our specific case, this is going to be the Boar Maiden that has only 15 conquest points. And that means that the red player will be able to do here conquest. And in this case, we're going to take one of his faction markers and we're going to place it right over here. And it signifies that right now the red faction is controlling this area. The defender unit will be able to choose one of these 2 actions in order to try and counter this attack or do something that we can see right over here. This is something, again, that the defender is going to choose from the combat card of the attacking faction. So we have here 2 options, but of course, each combat card will have different options, and each faction is going to have a different combat cards. So you already understood how many things we're going to have over here, but let's stick to this example. So the first option is to counter strike, and the defender's units are going to cause half damage rounded down. So this is something that we haven't talked about yet. We're going to see it soon enough. The other option is to retreat. The defender's units may move into adjacent areas according to the rules after the attack is resolved. So basically, let's say that they are going to choose this one. That means that the red player is going to take control over this area, And now after we have resolved this attack, the green faction's unit will be able to retreat to an adjacent area. So that means he will be able to move over here or to another area as long as we comply to the rules of movement. Two other things about conquest. First of all, if we have a unit, for example, that is doing a conquest in this area, for example, as you can see, this area is empty, so the conquest for sure will be a success, and that means that the red player will be able to control this area. On the other side, if they're trying to conquest a mountain, they will have to top the 20 that we can see right over here on this tile. And if we have an enemy unit over here, and they would like to do conquest in this tile, they will have to take in consideration the conquest points of this unit and add to it the points that they can see over here in this area. Now let's talk about causing damage, annihilation. So again, I'm going to take you to the parameter sheet that we have right over here. But now pay attention to the rightmost icon, and this is how much damage that specific unit is doing. So again, let's calculate everything that we have over here. That is 10 plus 10, that is 20, plus 15, that is 35. And that we will need to compare to the life that the Boar Maiden has. In our case, this Boar Maiden has only 15 life, and that means that we have here more attacking strength than the life. That unit is going to be destroyed and going to go back to the supply of the green faction. Don't forget that before we were actually resolving that, the green faction will be able to choose one of the three things that we can see at the bottom part of the card. So the first thing that we can see is this shield icon. Now let's look at the green faction's sheet, and we can see that it has some sort of a special defense. Move all enemy units, players and Oni, involved in this fight to an adjacent areas. You decide where the units are moved, take the blockades into account. So again, this is something that the green faction will be able to do. Pay attention that again, in this case, Boar Maiden will be dead, but at least it will be able to do something. The second option is like we saw before, counter-strike. The defender's units cause half damage rounded down. So here we can see that the Boar Maiden damage is 10. So half of this is 5, and it will cause damage to one of these units. Now, here the thing is that while the attacker is choosing which player it's going to deal damage to, it's going to be the defender that will choose which unit is going to take this damage. Now, why it's important? Because in our case, if it was the green unit that would have decided, then of course it's going to attack the drone, right? Because it has only 5 life. But because it's going to be the red player that is choosing which unit is going to take the damage, then of course he will decide that the unit with a higher amount of health will take this damage, and that means that nothing will happen. The third option that we can see here is hold the line. If at least one of the defender's units survives, they may mark the area with a territory marker. This is of course not our case, so this is something that the green faction will not choose. If we have this situation, for example, when we have more than one defender, then the attacker, first of all, will decide to which faction he did this damage, and of course he can split the damage between the different factions. Let's say that he will be able to generate enough damage that he knows for sure he will kill the green unit right over here. Then he can decide, again, it's just for the example, leave the stats, to cause a 20 out of the 50 damage to this unit, and by that killing it, and then the other 30 damage to apply to the blue faction. Now, the blue faction will be able to decide who will take the damage first. They will not be able to split the damage, so that means that if we again have here 30 damage, and he says, okay, I want to apply the damage first of all to the staff sergeant, then the staff sergeant first of all is going to take 30 damage in full, and then if there's more damage after the health points, it will go to the next unit. Each defender in the initiative order will be able to choose one of the counterattacks options that we can see at the bottom part of the card. So we have seen so far 4 actions that we can find on the back of every action card. I just remind you that each faction is going to choose only 2 of these actions if they want to, and after resolving them, so let's say that the red player has resolved theirs, we're going to move on to the initiative track, so the blue player is going to do the same thing, and then the green player. Now again, according to the initiative order, we're going to start resolving the blue phase. Now just one small thing that I forgot, after you have resolved your turn, don't forget to flip the marker, and that is going to indicate that you have finished taking all of your actions. So the red player has done it, the blue player as well, then the green player, and when all players are going to start resolving the different phases like the blue one, so after the red player is going to resolve his, he's going to flip it again. So this is a very cool system to remind us who has done their turn. So let's continue with the different actions that we can see. The first action is going to be a faction effect. So this is something again that we can see on the factions sheets themselves. Sometimes we're going to have factions with no effect at all, but usually it's something that is going to be indicated. So again, let's not take too much time in order to explore it because we have 8 factions, and move on to the next action. The next one is to change the initiative order. So in this card, for example, that the red player will be able to play, that is called Inner Strength, we can see move up or down 1 space in the initiative order. So the red player will be able to do it by going backwards, but again, we're going to keep the other initiative order as is. That means that the blue player is going to go over here, or he will be able to decide to go 2 steps backwards, and that means that the blue and the green will be pushed forward, and here is going to be the red player. Now let's talk about the last 2 actions that we can see on the cards, that it is not to our choice if to do them or not. This is something that when we have it on the card, we have to do it. The first one is to place an Oni, or maybe 2 Oni, depends on the card itself. In this case, the active player, that means the player that is resolving right now that specific phase. So let's take, for example, the blue player right over here that has this card that is called Scouting. If you can see, we have here in the green phase both of these actions. The first one is to place any 2 Oni. That means that he will be able to choose any one of the Onis in the supply. That means also both of these legendary Onis that we can see right over here, and place them on the board with some restrictions. The first restriction is that Oni may be placed only in areas with a Tsukuyumi property. That is the symbol that we can see right over here. So pay attention that this, for example, is also an option because we have here the Tsukuyumi property symbol. And their other option is they may place them adjacent to areas where the Tsukuyumi property or to Oni territories. So pay attention that we have here 2 different things, okay? This is the Tsukuyumi property and this is the Oni territories. So just like the other factions can control the different areas, the Oni can do the same with these specific tokens. So they can put it right over here, for example, and that will be considered Tsukuyumi property, being controlled by the Oni. So in our case, again, the blue player will be able to take 2 of these Oni units. Let's say that he took this one and also this Dark Observer that we can see right over here. That is the legendary Oni. And they will be able to place it, for example, over here. Why? Because this is adjacent to an area that has, for example, the Tsukuyumi property, or in this case, also the Oni controls it. But pay attention that we have here something a little bit different, because here blockades do play an important role. So if you remember a while ago when we talked about producing the units of the different factions, we said that even if we have a blockade, we'll be able to place the unit right over here. In our case, the blue player will not be able to put the Oni units right over here, even though it is adjacent, but we have here some blockades. The next action that we have is the Oni Conquest. So in our case, it's choose Oni from one area, move them up to one area, and execute one attack. So we already understand plus minus what it means. We can choose any number of Onis from one area. If we want, we can move them to an adjacent area, right? And then we're going to execute an attack in this place. Now, pay attention that the Oni only has one combat card, right? That is called the Oni Conquest. So the Oni is going to execute whatever we can see at the top part of the card, and the defending faction will be able to choose any one of the counter actions, as we can see at the bottom part of the card. Pay attention that the Oni do not conquer moon areas or areas with the property of Tsukuyumi unless they contain players' territory markers, which basically means that now these areas already are being controlled by another player. And of course, the Oni will not conquer areas with the Oni territory markers in them. So basically this Oni, this neutral faction that the different players are controlling, is just here to wreak havoc on the different players on the board, and they will try to spread as much as possible. Now, when we have the Oni as the defender, then we will need to choose a player that is going to play for it. That means that he's going to choose, for example, a counter attack for the Oni player. In this case, it's going to be the player that is last on the initiative track. If it's the player himself, then it's going to be the second to last on the initiative track. So if we have here the red player that is attacking right over here, so the player that is going to choose the counterattack for the Oni is going to be the blue player. If this would have been the situation, for example, then obviously the red player is not going to choose for the Oni, it's going to be second to last, so again it's going to be the blue player. Pay attention that in combat, the Oni faction can never choose the defense action and the protection as the counterattacks. So now, after we have talked a lot about combat, and it might seem like maybe it's the most complicated part of this game, let's take one combat example that is going to be a little bit complex, but at least we'll know that we understand everything. In this example, we're going to have the red faction with the units Cyberoid, both of the Cyber Samurai 2.1 and 2.2, and also the attack drone. All of them are going to attack one of the Oni units and also two of the green faction units, that is the Boar Guard and the Boar Master. So now the red player needs to choose one of his combat cards, and he's going to choose the target acquisition combat card. Also, it is worth mentioning that in a previous round, he also activated the uplink that is called Tetsu Orbital Laser. This uplink says that in the red phase, use Tetsu Orbital Laser for free, cause 10 damage points in any area, the affected player chooses the target of your attack. It cannot be combined with an ordinary attacks, but the exception is if we're using the combat card Target Acquisition, which is of course exactly what we can see over here. So obviously the red player has chosen this card to do Annihilation. Your units are going to cause damage. Instead of the defender, the Cyber Samurai may decide which enemy units are going to suffer the damage, which is huge advantage. Also, if you have the Tetsu, the damage is increased by 10 points, which is exactly what we have. So in order to calculate all the attack of the red faction, we can see that we have a 20, 15, 10, that is already a 45, plus the attack drone, that is 55. So he's going to cause 65 hit points. The red player has decided from the 65 damage to apply 10 on the Oni player and the rest of the 55 on the green faction. So now we need to see which player is going to play for the Oni faction. Since it's the red player who is last in the initiative track, it's going to be second to the last, which is the blue player. Now we remember that the Oni faction cannot choose the defense action or the protection action, so number one is basically dead to us. So the blue player has decided to use the action that we can see here, number 5, called Damaged Earth Crust. If Tetsu has been used, mark this area with the property Unstable. And we already remember that the Tetsu has been used. So we're going to take this marker of the Unstable and we're going to put it on this area right over here. And because this specific unit, as we can see, the small Oni has only 10 hit points, then this small miniature is going to say goodbye to us and going to be back in the supply of the Oni. The rest of the 55 damage is going to be applied to the green faction. And now it's the time for the green player to choose one of the actions that we can see here at the bottom part of the card. And he's going to decide to use number 1, which is either to use his action's special defense or to use the protection. Now he's going to choose the protection, and that means that each unit is going to have 10 more hit points. So the Beauregard is going to have 30, and the Boarmaster is going to have 40. That means that together they have 70 hit points. So now the red player understands that he will not be able to destroy both of them. But we remember that it's going to be the red player who chooses which unit is going to start taking damage. So he's going to choose the Boarmaster as the first unit who's taking damage, and that means that the Boarmaster is dead. And the rest of the 15 damage is not enough to kill the Beauregard. So he has survived, and he is going to stay exactly where he is. At some point of the game, if one of the factions achieves either one of the mission cards that we can see right over here, or their faction's mission, they're going to score points immediately. We're going to mark it by taking one of these faction markers, and we're going to place it on the mission card that they have just accomplished. For example, if it was the blue mission, they're going to do just like this. And that's it. They will not be able to accomplish this mission again. Of course, they will be able to accomplish the other missions that they have still didn't accomplish. If, for example, they have accomplished their faction mission, then they're going to take 2 markers, right? Because that is worth 2 victory points, and they're going to place it right over here on the victory point board. Now, at the end of the round, and that means after all the factions have executed their red phase, we're going to have this small scoring phase, and that means that right now, if we have a faction that is controlling the center of the moon, as you can see right over here, is going to have a victory point. So again, they're going to take one of their faction markers, and they're going to place it on the victory point board itself. And after the 4th round, again, since this is going to be a standard game, we're going to have a few things that we're going to score points for. First of all, for each area that a faction is controlling, they're going to score 1 victory point. If at that point they're controlling one of the fertile grounds, then they're going to score 2 victory points, as we can see on the tile itself. According to their position on the initiative board, they're going to score either 2 victory points or 1. And of course, if we have other resources of victory points, but that is again specifically to different factions, they're going to score victory points again. And as we have said, the faction with the most victory points, what a surprise, is going to be declared as the winner. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that you now understand that Tsukuyumi is not a complex game. Don't be afraid of it. Bring it to the table. It's really an awesome game. Take care, and I'll see you next time.